Welcome to our SDG series um, on AI for SDGs here at the United Nations Association. With us, we have an amazing panel of speakers, starting from youth civic entrepreneurs to global goals ambassadors and subject matter experts who are in audience, as well as youth who have taken the initiative towards a better future and a better sustainable development goal 11, sustainable cities and communities. That's what our discussion is going to focus on at the intersection of SDG 11 and how AI and especially emerging technologies can be leveraged for global good as opposed to primarily profitability that our world is moving towards. Thanking everyone for your patience today. I'm going to wait for just one more minute for everyone to settle in. I see a couple more people in the waiting room, and then we will get started right away. One of our panelists, Jeff, um, extended his apologies and for not being able to be with us here, but I'm sure he would have been a great addition to our panel. But we have a great panel regardless, and we can go ahead and get started with the introductions. Before we jump into the speakers, I'd love to introduce our two youth civic entrepreneurs, Frank and Nate, both coming from Penn State University and working on Project Green Thumb. I'll let you both kind of tell us a little more about yourselves, how Project Green Thumb came about, what the project is. Yeah, feel free to take your turns.
My name is Nathan Leo, and I'm co-founder of Project Green Thumb. I'm currently more of a technical kind of person on actually developing the database of species that we have. Our focus is collecting all different species from around the world, specifically first focusing on plants and getting the characteristics about those plants. I'll let Frank introduce himself, and he could definitely fill in the gaps I'm missing.
Hi, my name is Frank. So, our goal is to inform people on the interactions that occur in our ecosystems and how native plants are imperative to the survival of all the organisms that are native to the US. And part of how this meets the UN sustainability goal is that our wild areas are increasingly threatened. We're urbanizing at a rapid pace, and even the wild areas we have left are many of them are not functioning ecosystems with invasive species anymore. So it's imperative that we start incorporating plants and infrastructure that helps our wildlife into our new cities so that all the species can survive along with us.
Absolutely. Thank you both for the brief sort of introduction on Project Green Thumb itself. We'll dive deeper into it and how your Project Green Thumb relates specifically to SDG 11. And Frank, you touched on it briefly as well on sustainability, sustainable development of cities and communities, and not just cities and communities of human life, but also the ecological side of things as well. So that's a very new perspective to the SDG, and I'm excited to dive deeper. To bring in a little bit of a policy lens, and coming from UNA USA, and as a global goals ambassador, Sean, I welcome you into our panel and thank you for your insights that we are very much excited to hear about. Sean, please feel free to introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us a little more about your work as a global goals ambassador for Goal 11.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Thanks for putting this together, and thanks everybody for being here. It's great to be with you. I'm Sean Schrader, recently graduated from the University of South Florida with my MBA, and it's really been my pleasure to be a Global Goals Ambassador for the greater part of the last year. And I've really always had a keen interest in all the SDGs, like I'm sure a lot of you do, but particularly in SDG 11. because of the way I think it empowers you to take action within your local community. I think that is one of those things. You see challenges that we're facing today, you think about opportunities for the future. It can sometimes be hard to think about how do you scale things on a national, global level, especially as you mentioned from a policy perspective. And I think that when you mobilize things, when you get engaged within your community, that can really be a platform to elevate things. And particularly with an AI, I'm excited for this discussion. I was fortunate about a year ago to lead a research tour of how different businesses in Florida and across the country have been kind of utilizing AI technology within sustainable practices and things of that nature. And then, as a result, how then they foresee the workforce changing and how they foresee some of their day-to-day tasks changing. So excited to talk about that stuff and more.
Super cool. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sean. Thank you for the rest of our panel for introducing themselves. We'll dive a little bit deeper, and I would love to start with you, Frank. You did mention a little bit about how your Project Green Thumb kind of plays into the SDG 11 per se, from a sustainable cities and communities perspective. I'd love to dive a little deeper into the technical side of things. Perhaps you or Nate, how Project Green Thumb kind of works, how it came about during the time of founding. What is it that the thought process went behind when you guys went, you know what, we should start Project Green Thumb? I'll let either one of you kind of take it, and then excited to hear.
Yeah, so I used to manage a wholesale nursery. I'm a landscape architect. My passion is plants, specifically native plants. And throughout that experience, selling to landscapers and selling to homeowners, I realized that there was a huge educational disparity about our native plants and how ecosystems should function. There's a certain subset of species that are sold commercially that don't necessarily overlap with what our ecosystem demands. So I went to Nate, who's our technical lead, and pitched an idea, which is a landscape design AI, where you can scan your yard, create a 3D map, and it will identify all the existing plant species and then intelligently select plant species and arrange them in a design that's not only aesthetically pleasing, but also helps out your local ecosystem. And throughout gathering, the more data we gather, the more accurate it can get. And it can help inform people on the connections between these plants and the environment around them.
That is very, very cool to hear, kind of coming from a landscape architecture, like you mentioned, background and going into the technical side of things. Nate, I'll hand it over to you, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the technical side, even starting from the founding of the project itself, how it grew, how did you guys scale, what is it looking like?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started off with just a regular kind of minimal viable product for a time span of about a month. We worked on it for about 2 months. We got around 20,000 species, and they were specifically focused on Penn State and species, just plant species, no animal, no nothing else. And we actually created a algorithm that automatically selected plants based on your zip code in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a state in the United States. I don't know everybody's background. I just want to give a background on that. But with that, we get the person's kind of tailored response where if they want a certain colored plant, we have those characteristics. If they want, you know, more of particular type of plant, we could also give them that. But where AI would come into play then is actually intelligently select the plants, because there's certain characteristics in nature where you need, Frank could even go more into this, where you need like a certain amount of trees, you need a certain amount of shrubs in a ecosystem to actually for it to be sustainable and for it to thrive properly. And also with this too, we were trying to figure out how we could get the user site conditions. So if there are in a more partially shaded area or more like a swampy kind of area, we could recommend them more plants that would be applicable for those kind of conditions as well. We made that kind of MVP about a year ago today. Actually, it was complete, and since then we kind of like took a step back, and we really are going hammering it home on creating the world's best database on species. And I want to say this because we've been really creating this database now for over a year. We've collected around 400,000 different plant species with different characteristics as well. And iNaturalist, which is the leading kind of platform where people could go on and identify different kind of species all around the world, we're meeting basically what they are identifying. So we are working to get pretty much all the information from all these different sources online intelligently as well, looking through it manually, spending a lot of hours doing it. But doing this process, we met basically every single observation that iNaturalist has. We have all kinds of different information. Granted, more plants have more information than other plants. So we are also working on also trying to discover how the plants could relate to animal kind of data, some fish data as well. Frank could go more into like kind of the specific ecosystems, but we're also working on an identification algorithm as well at this point in time with our database. So when we're ready to actually ship our final product out, we have the one of the best the plant identifications and species identificators in the world because currently there's a lot of identification software out there, but it lacks in diversity and actually trying to identify species because it only recommends one species at the end of the day, but two species could look very similar to each other. And this is where ours is different, where it could recommend a list of potential species with a percentage of, okay, we actually think this plant would be number one, but it could also be this, and it will pop up images next to each other so you could go on and compare and contrast. But our goal is to actually include all the different kind of species that we have in our database, which is around 10 times more species than all the other identifiers out there right now. I mean, Frank, I don't know if you guys want to add on anything, but that's
Yeah, so the balance of plant species when they flower, what kind of birds or insects they're attracting is incredibly important. And it's very time consuming designing an ecologically friendly landscape on your own time. So, automating this with AI would allow us to implement this on a large scale. Say, if we're doing a 10,000 acre forest reclamation project, it could recommend the exact percentage of species tailored specifically to what wildlife exists in that area. And native biomass is insanely important because it is the basis of our ecosystem. Many of our native insects and pollinators have a symbiotic relationship that has co-evolved over hundreds of thousands of years with our native plants. And many of them can only lay their eggs on one specific kind of plant in a genus or even a specific kind of plant in genus and species. For example, like monarch butterflies, can only lay their eggs on milkweed, and they're disappearing because our milkweed is disappearing also. And our pollinators are insanely important, specifically our butterflies and moths, not because they're pollinators, they're actually pretty poor pollinators, but because caterpillars are the main food source for all of our birds. And you need around 70% native biomass in a forest in order to support the ecosystem. So, say you have, they did a study on chickadees, and chickadees are a small bird. They can have around 20 eggs at a single time, so 20 chicks. Each chick in the 3 weeks from when it hatches from the egg until when it flies requires 1,000 caterpillars. So the parents are you need a lot of food available within a certain small geographic region in order to successfully raise this clutch of eggs. And even after they flee the nest, they still get fed for around 3 weeks. So if you do the math on that, if they have 20 chicks that need to survive for 6 weeks, that's around 40,000 caterpillars, which requires an incredible amount of native leaves and plants around it where all of our Lepidoptera, which are butterflies and moths, can lay their eggs. Not only this, but invasive species in even our national parks have dropped the biomass to below 70% in certain areas, which creates a down spiral in our ecosystem. It collapses. And in addition to this, it's not only about host plants like our native insects laying eggs on it. The nuts and berries actually have a nutritional difference as well. So, say you plant bamboo from Asia, Asian berries tend to be very high in sugar because birds there do a short migration and they just kind of eat up all the resources in one area and then skip to the next area. Whereas our birds here do a long migration down south in the winter, as you know. So our berries natively tend to be very high in fats and proteins to fuel them on their long journey. So if a pack of birds is to land on a patch of bamboo and eat all the sugary berries, it would be like drinking an energy drink. They get a really incredible short burst of energy, but it won't sustain them for their long journey.
Frank, thank you so, so much. That was actually a very, very insightful sort of lesson, so to say. I'm sure I don't want to be the only one, but I'm sure I'm not, who actually didn't know the sheer implications of ecological sort of differences and man-made causes that kind of lead to these disparities, differences, lack of a better word, disruptions within ecological systems that work in a very sort of thin balance or harmony that could very easily be disrupted by, like you said, just the sugar content in berries matter when these birds are flying. That's incredible. It just kind of blew my mind. To even think about the AI implications of in a sector so niche, but so essential to our very livelihoods. Talking about applications of Project Green Thumb itself, some things that kind of came to my mind was not even at an individual or a consumer level where someone's just trying to get a little their lawn looking nice or the landscaping side of things looking better. But just like you mentioned, it's more than just the visual appeal. It's about sustaining livelihoods of these communities called biomes in their own natural states, as well as an application that kind of comes to my mind is, you even touched on it a little bit, national parks or even sanctuaries, reservations where these natural habitats are preserved. But if you are able to preserve them in a quantified manner, where you're able to reduce the number of uncontrollable variables that now you can, because you have the data in front of you and it is analyzed and visualized in a way through Project Green Thumb, that the very end person who's taking care of these natural habitats are able to understand how many caterpillars are needed for that amount of butterflies. That's an incredible, actually, an analogy and an example that you provide, Frank. I would love to dive deeper into the application side of things, but before we do, I'd love to bring Sean, your perspective on the application side of things. How do you see Project Green Thumb kind of, or an initiative of this sort and scale, kind of play out into the greater SDG 11 goals that are out there?
Yeah, well, I think this is wonderful. I've been, getting a little science lesson myself, taking notes along the way. It's really, really cool the work you're doing. And I think that this has really the makings of something that can be applied in practice in day-to-day situations where folks are looking to not only, expand their knowledge of what's going on, with a ecological perspective, but also think about how do we expand some of these things locally where you're able to see sustained impact with time. And again, that's always my perspective with STG 11. And so what I kind of hopefully view from this kind of project is the ability, not only once it's scaled and sounds like about ready to go, as it launches, as it's available publicly, to be able to, first of all, train in the community about the resource this is, be able to showcase the value it has and showcase the clear benefits it provides. And then hopefully through support of partner organizations and maybe even local communities that see the value in this, with supportive funding, with supportive awareness, to hopefully showcase this more, to be able to bring this into more communities, to be able to showcase this as a true resource, which I think is really important. And that's where I think the idea, I know we're talking a lot about AI, but I have found in my personal research I've done on AI and then on the relation to SDG 11, that impact of storytelling is so key. Frank, what you've been talking about, some of these, personal experiences are wonderful. And I think that when you're able to, really talk about these high level challenges and bring them back down to personal experiences you're having, and when these app users can have personal experiences in their gardens, in their own, beautification projects that make a difference like this, that's huge. And I think that's really how this is further advanced in a great way.
Thank you, Sean, for your insights. I'd love to add on a little bit to your piece, and kind of ask you as well. So, how do you see AI? And like you see here, it's a very use case specific, or more like if anything, it's a case study on how AI can very much help us make measurable progress towards the Sustainable Development Goal 11. What are some other ways that you see AI making a positive impact in the space, or even on the flip side of things, how do you see AI currently having a negative effect in the sustainable development of cities and communities, and how can we go about this?
Well, that's a great question. I was fortunate this past fall to spend a little bit of time in Japan, and while I was there, I was able to do a research tour to understand how they, as a country, and how local communities and businesses and organizations are utilizing AI technology in different ways to support their work. And what was really interesting to me was a few different organizations I was able to kind of shadow. There's a local university in Japan that was doing a lot of work in equipping robots with autonomous sensors and technology to be able to travel local beaches within Japan, not only to kind of be able to have a geographical perspective on the beaches and understand the layout, but also pick up trash that's on the beach, recognizing what trash is, what it looks like, being able to do all that stuff by itself without a human interaction. I think that is really, really cool. And the work they were showcasing is now expanding across the country in Japan to different types of universities, whether you're at a beach, whether you're in another park-like community, somewhere where unfortunately there may be trash that is present, being able to utilize robots and stuff like that that's autonomous in these initial types of activities, and then further training these technologies to expand, I thought was really, really interesting, and I think serves as a great model for what can be done in other parts of the world regarding this technology. And then I think AI, I also found, is doing a lot of good in tracking inefficiencies and tracking waste and tracking waste output and those types of things. And in particular, I was able to see this showcased at a Lexus factory in Japan. As you can imagine, at a Lexus factory, Lexus is a very, very popular automaker along with Toyota. They're producing all kinds of vehicles all the time. And so, in order to track their, inefficiencies, whether it's their CO2 output, whether it's the type of waste that's being used after so many vehicles are produced, those types of data points are key. And so then what they have been doing is leveraging a lot of autonomous systems within their production line, robots that help to assemble cars, different inspection points along that process that's able to determine how much waste has been used in the process. Again, the amount of carbon emissions that have been utilized, if any, in the process of developing these vehicles. And then where possible, working to reduce those impacts. And so that has been really, really cool. Lexus showed me, since they've been employing this technology really ahead of the curve, I think 5 years ago to now, they've seen sustained efforts in reducing, any of those environmental impacts that you would have otherwise, which I think is really, really fascinating and exciting, and hopefully, again, a model for what can be used by other companies and other industries around the world. And I would say, on the negative side of AI and this kind of thing, I think a challenge that we are all facing in AI really relates to misinformation. I'm sure you all see this all the time. But I think it is pertinent to SDG 11 because I will see a lot of times, like for example, where I'm at in Florida, we just had hurricane season. It was a really tough season, a lot of damage, a lot of devastation, unfortunately. And during that news coverage time, during the initial aftermath of the storm, if you looked on social media, you would see a lot of AI generated images of what was going on that showcased damage, that showcased impacts of the storm, that in a lot of cases, quite frankly, were just not true. And you kind of saw it on both spectrums. Sometimes it was, oh, there was a significant damage. There's sharks that have come in from the Gulf that are now floating in the waters of Tampa Bay, which thankfully no sharks in my neighborhood. So you had that extreme. But then at the same time, you also had the extreme of showcasing different buildings and stuff like that, and people would say, "Oh, it's all fine, everything's in great condition," when in fact, buildings and trees and that kind of stuff had sustained damage. And so, in a emergency response mode, if you're trying to respond in real time, you're trying to understand what's going on, that's not very helpful. And I think that in a larger sense, within SDG 11. That is a key indicator, of how we can be leveraging this tool for good, I think, in being able to, showcase, storm damage and things like that through data, through different pieces, and not necessarily through, fake image generation, other things that really don't depict what's going on in a good way.
Thank you, Sean, for highlighting quite a number of very specific use cases that you've witnessed personally and kind of through lived experiences and through your research abroad. One thing that I was able to relate to the very model, kind of the very foundational model that Nate and Frank are using in your Project Green Thumb as well, where it's identifying the plant species or the ecological elements that are there, and then being able to classify, sort, categorize them in the right ways to then analyze the data in however way you seem fit. And similarly, like you mentioned, Sean, in the case of trash, being able to identify what is trash as opposed to what's a natural element such as a rock or so. I feel like, yeah, these follow very similar computer vision principles and such that help us come about to these new applications. And all this to say, in the modern day that we live in now, we don't have to really reinvent the wheel. The wheel is out there. It's the applications that the novel applications of existing technologies that we come up with today. So I think that's an incredible way, and it lowers the barrier to entry to innovation. I feel like where we see increasing amount of youth like ourselves kind of getting into the field of innovation and entrepreneurship and kind of taking action and initiatives into their own hands to move forward and make measurable progress towards our goals. And lastly, when you mentioned the negative effects of AI, one of the primary ones being misinformation in this age of information that we live in. Misinformation is very much weaponized against us, be it in a scene of natural calamities like a hurricane, or even be a geopolitical situation where a lot of people are being moved from different side to sides and their opinions are being swayed, policymakers and such. So at many different scales, it is impacting our very livelihoods. And speaking of challenges with regarding data and misinformation and just information in general, in the case of AI, I'd love to ask this to you, Nate, particularly in as the technology lead for your project, what are some of the technical challenges that you face? And like we see in misinformation being one of the primary ones. I'm sure there's the sheer immense amount of volume of data that you had to scrape, gather, understand, and go about. I'm sure there was a lot of challenges regarding just this big data aspect. Talk us through it, if you will.
Yeah, of course. The really the biggest one is just there's a new term going around called vibe coding. But if you just and vibe coding is basically when you just trust the AI getting all the information and applying it without you overlooking it. And that is the biggest thing we do not want to do here. And that's why if I just did that, we would have a database up, we would have a product up. We've been working on this for a year because actually going through these sources and ensuring that they're reliable academic sources, doing it ethically as well, because there's a lot of sites out there where it's not ethical to just scrape a site if they say if it's against their terms and conditions, if it's not on their robots.txt. So there's that as well. And we want to more or less trust the research papers that are out there and what is being put out by states, communities, and nature groups as well. Frank actually linked me a lot of different stuff that we actually went through ourselves. And it's really sad because there is I could see a lot of misinformation being put out there and people just inferring random plant information. You see it on social media, you see it even on Reddit. If we were going to use Reddit to help us, there's so much conflicting information on there that we found, and it's just sad to see that because we don't know what's true, what's not. So this is where our product is trying to come in here and really try to be that source instead of relying on like Wikipedia and open source platforms. Our platform is going to allow users to give us information, allow us to edit it, but instead of being like Wikipedia where it'll just go on and get approved almost instantly, we have a team of moderators actually working with us right now that we're actually going through our information and the database, trying to confirm that it is correct. You could ask Frank, like we're going through all our plant data right now, ensuring that, 300,000, 320,000 species, up to 400,000 species, but it's a lot of different plants to go through in a day. And that's what the hardest part is just trying to combat the misinformation too, because if you trust outputs from a large language model like ChatGPT or like your Google Geminis, your Claudes and whatnot, that information isn't backed by anything. It's just their models are just trained on a bunch of information on the internet that is usually conflicting, and then it's also very hard for that model to pinpoint a specific plant information without using a database to basically query from. So we're again trying to be that resource, and I hope I answered the question of misinformation when searching through all this data, because there's a lot out there. And even now with these image generators, people are generating fake plants of images, and now it's harder than ever to collect these images because you know we don't know what's true and what's not. Luckily, iNaturalist does really do a very good job at combating that, where users go on that application and upload an image, and usually there's a team of moderators on iNaturalist that are researchers and whatnot. They classified images saying, okay, this is actually true, or okay, this is false, this is generated and whatnot. So they're doing a good job on that front, to my understanding. But other than that, there's not a lot of other people in this field right now that are going out and verifying this information as well. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. No, you definitely did answer the question from a data integrity perspective. Like you mentioned within the increased use of AI has of course facilitated this very project and kind of the infrastructure that's out there. In most of the Western world, you're able to leverage to analyze and understand and move forward with the different large data sets that you're working with. However, this very innovation is what has resulted in multiple hindrances regarding data integrity and AI generated images and making it difficult to sort through what's actually real and what's a hologram in a sense. So yeah, on that note, we have added many different dimensions to our topic of SDG 11 today at the very intersection of technology, AI, and sustainable cities and communities. And on that note, I would love to open up the rest of our time to our audience here for any questions, comments, insights that you've derived from our speakers and what you've heard in our discussion so far today. And if you'd like to add on to something or have a question or so, please feel free to raise your hand and unmute yourself. And while we wait for some audience questions to come through, I see, Brooke, you have a question. Please, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Rakib. I also want to say thank you to all the panelists. I really appreciate this conversation. I'm learning a lot, actually. But yeah, so I guess I kind of wanted to, I guess bring into conversation, um, talking about, Green Thumb. I can definitely see how what you guys are doing is making sure that plants are diversity and like it also like these have effects on the ecosystem, and I can see like how that plays into so many things because I've learned from from when I was young that ecosystems can, when they go out of whack, they everything goes out of whack, so I guess not just farming but not just like ecosystems and farming and sustainable cities, but I was wondering about like how maybe that same technology can be somewhat implemented into proper barriers for natural disasters in cities, because it's very similar in the sense of like, oh, implementing plants into in certain areas, but also implementing diversity of plants that can somewhat withstand maybe flooding, or that can, reduce, I don't know, wind, or no, not wind, but like pollen or something like that, or air pollution, in certain cities. I think that would be like really interesting to, I don't know, kind of bring to the conversation. I was just kind of like wondering what you guys think about that.
Yeah, so floodplain ecosystems are incredibly important at mitigating the effects of natural disasters and also our drinking water as well. So when you have a native landscape, say a prairie, all of these plants, like the grasses, their roots will go 15 feet deep. There's an incredible amount of water infiltration. It absorbs all the water, and about a third of the roots die every year. So that just turns into almost a giant straw where all the water can go way down into the soil, as opposed to your lawn grass, which has about 3 inches of roots, where most of it runs off and overwhelms our stormwater management systems. I actually know a guy who works with the New York State Water Authority. He does stream bank reclamation projects because runoff creates an incredible, it makes it incredibly difficult to keep the water clean, and it makes it very hard for systems to filter the water for our drinking water. And they plant native ecosystems on the stream banks with a lot of roots and plants that survive in marginal ecosystems in order to stabilize the stream banks, give back to the environment, and ensure that we have clean drinking water and that the flood will not be as bad because a lot of that water is percolating down into the earth as opposed to running off.
Okay, thank you for that. I was actually, yeah, that's pretty cool, I guess.
Yeah, I hope that answered your question. Let me know if there's any other aspects that you would like to touch on.
I guess I'd want to follow up with also like, do you think that, the same technology can also somewhat maybe, I don't know, work so well, maybe over optimize that it, somewhat takes away maybe from the environment around? Because, like we said, like the ecosystem, everything kind of has a shift, everything has like a else. Like maybe having a plant in one area kind of reduces the biodiversity in like an air, far outside environment, like in terms of like it attracts way more bees over here, or something like that. I don't know. Do you guys ever see that the technology can somewhat take away from the places where the technology is not being implemented?
Yeah, so for example, one of our, if you plant too much of one plant in the beginning or not enough, it could take over or fade out in the ecosystem. So we have a scanner as part of our identifier, which will know the balance of species, everything that's there, and we'll be able to predict through the data we gather how all these plants will spread throughout time. And that as we progress with our technology, we'll be able to more accurately predict what the balance of species initially should be, so that 30 years down the line, it's the correct balance as opposed to maybe one species taking over and being way out of whack and then crowding out other species that are imperative for other wildlife species.
Wow, yeah,
But
that's
yes, that it definitely could go wrong if implemented poorly, which
yeah.
is why AI is incredibly important because it can learn and get more and more accurate the more data we give it. And also wanted to touch on, we lack the manpower really to mitigate or to optimize these huge geographical areas, say national parks or a whole watershed. With our technology, we plan to implement drone scans eventually. So we'd be able to scan huge geographical areas, assess what's there, and then the AI would have millions, if not billions, of data points from all throughout the internet and other scans and databases. And it would be able to more accurately than a human with way less labor predict how that ecosystem is going to progress over time, what we need to be doing to mitigate the effects of natural disasters, and optimize for not only the benefit of humans, but also the species that are there.
I hope that answers your question, Brooke. And Frank, thank you so much for kind of touching on that with the real world examples in this very case. And Brooke, I appreciate the discussion on exploring further sort of possibilities of what this technology could where this technology could really go. See another hand raise and a question from Arnav. Arnav, the floor is yours. Feel free to introduce yourself and go ahead with your question.
Thank you. As you know, my name is Arnav, and I have a question about a topic we didn't get into as much. So, how can AI help grows? How can predictive analytics in AI help forecast the growth of slums and planning for sustainable infrastructure in the slums? So it's much more sanitary and they have more access to clean water. And is there a way we can tie this into environmentalism?
Sean, I'd love for you to jump in if you have any insights on it.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, on AI. My internet broke up for a minute, but if I understand correctly, AI environmentalism, that topic is a whole, and how we can kind of um, integrate those things relating to SDG 11. I think, like we've been talking about today, the tool that is Project Green Thumb is a great model for this. I think a lot of times when we're thinking about environmentalism, at least in my own experience, whether you're trying to, get your friends to do something that's environmentally friendly, trying to get a community to change a policy, getting to look at a whole of the U.S. national government, or even some kind of United Nations level policy to change something. A lot of times, one of the first things people think about is, well, if I do this, if we implement this kind of policy, what is the impact going to be on other people's lives? And unfortunately, a lot of times it's not, well, what is the, positive environmental impact going to be, as much as it is, what is the negative convenience impact going to be on impacting my day-to-day life and the things I'm doing already, which, is a consideration, I guess, right, depending on what's going on. And so I think that in the sense now of what we've been talking about, being able to say, well, we can use these tools like AI, we can use these databases, we can use this type of technology to encourage, again, not earth-shattering, like you said earlier, not reinventing the wheel technology, but building on previous stories of success and methods of impact to then tailor it back to how this doesn't impact people's day-to-day lives in a negative way, I think is how we build upon that. And then I think the other piece that's so key um, is the education piece, right? How do we all be stewards for, the environment, for, environmentalism and ecology and all of these types of things. And I think when you can utilize this kind of technology, whether it's in the form of these apps and short form videos, again, storytelling, that's I think a key piece of this, and that's what I've tried to do in my work up to this point. And I hope after today's call, we're able to partner together a little bit with your project to advance that as well.
Absolutely, Sean. I also wanted to kind of just circle back on something specific that Arnav mentioned in his question that I really liked was the idea of slums and um, the sheer socioeconomic disparity that you notice in mega cities, and especially in the developing world, where parts of certain cities are so extremely industrialized and developed in a technological or even infrastructural sense that it really leaves out it really leaves all opportunities at a national scale only to those cities in certain countries, and versus if you go about 2 hours out of that city, you may have a difficult time finding internet out there. And this sheer just socioeconomic and just infrastructural disparity that we notice, how do you think perhaps the innovation or AI particularly, or maybe just emerging technologies in general can kind of tackle that disparity, and how it can, like Arnav mentioned in a very specific case, make slums more sanitary or make certain unlivable conditions more livable.
Well, thank you for that, and I apologize that that was the one part I think that got cut off earlier. Thank you for that question. That's very important, and I think that um, really the key of it all, as you all know, it's about leveling the playing field, right? It's the things we take for granted, like being able to have the internet access to participate in this today, being able to have the luxury to participate in these types of projects that just might not be possible if you're in that kind of situation. And I really liked what you just touched on about being able to leverage this technology in those ways to make communities more livable, to support what is possible. And again, I think it's one of these things you can't change it in a day, right? You can't do things that are with a lot of other impacts in the area, a lot of other factors influencing some of these conditions, but I think with time, with some of this technology possible. And one specific instance I think that is um, really relevant to this is thinking about how we are exploring the future of housing and the use of AI in that sense. There has been a lot of work I've been following around the country, although I'm not any kind of housing policy expert, but of how we're looking at the future of affordable housing, not just as, building apartments that are sectioned for different income tiers, but rather different types of housing. Is it, a shipping container that has been able to be reconverted into something? Then, as a result of that, how can we be using AI technology in that kind of development to support, the management of the property complex and those types of things? And so I think that those are ingenuitive types of ideas that can make a difference in this way, that can leverage and utilize the technology that really make a difference. And I think then I know I'm a broken record on the storytelling, but I think then especially in these types of communities where this challenge is happening, when you're leveraging AI to support, better living conditions, more housing, a better community environment, when you're then able to showcase one or two stories of success and how that's impacting many lives around you, then when you're looking to scale, you're looking to expand, local governments, project investors, organizations, I think, are very, very prone then to want to explore those ideas and then expand them further when they see that there are measured instances of success by others.
I'm glad we got to touch on the topic of disparity a little bit as well, in SDG 11, pertaining to SDG 11, and how kind of technology can tackle certain disparities, be it in an ecological sense or even a human communities that we see. And on that note, I wanna let us know that we are nearing the end of our session here today on SDG 11 at the AI for SDG series with United Nations Association. Sean, I want to dearly thank you and extend my utmost gratitude to you, as well as Nate and Frank, for being a part of our panel here this evening and talking through these different dimensions of SDG 11 that a lot of us, kind of me personally, didn't know before, and a little bit of a lesson on plant science as well. Frank, thank you for that. I actually genuinely enjoyed, and I'm sure I'm not the only one there. Thank you so much for exploring the positives and the negatives of AI in sustainable development of communities and cities with us. Thank you, Sean, Nate, and Frank. I want to thank the rest of the audience as well. For any closing remarks, I'll open up the floor to our panel. And on that note, I want to conclude our meeting today here, and I hope to see the rest of us next week. Any closing remarks for our panelists?
No, just thanks very much. It was great to be with all of you. Very, very inspiring, as always, with these events.
Absolutely, Sean. Cheers.
Thank you for having us. We really appreciate allowing you guys to tell our story, and hopefully we helped out in the conversation.
Thank you guys for having us.